And begin the Yellow Springs Candidate Forum. Good evening. Good evening. Okay. When they conned me into this job, they told me all I had to do was to say 2 words: hi and welcome. I've done that. I've got another couple of things that I'd like to talk about. One is you're here to listen to the candidates. The candidates will talk about a lot of things. We sent them a letter asking them to mention certain things, but they still may not be talking about something that you really want to hear. And so there will be questions afterward, and the questions are not given orally, they're written on cards and taken over to that table there. And that lady will sort them out and present them. So that's the one thing that you need to do is ask questions to get the information that you really want. I also want to point out that these sessions, these candidates nights, have been put on by the James A. McKee Association since 1992. That you may have heard about us. The newspaper, the local newspaper, keeps calling us the men's group. And to start with, we were a men's group. The group was started by a man who was our police chief, Jim McKee. And he reckoned that people that were elected and the people that were appointed necessarily know why everybody's so anyway, okay, switch has to make. All right, let's try it. Yeah, you're right. Go wrong. Anyway, I'll talk loud. Loudly, yes. Jim McKee started this group, the James A. McKee Association, with a bunch of guys. We're back on. Yes. Now does that one? Oh, that works. Okay. Anyway, Jim McKee started this group with a bunch of guys, and what they did was invite elected and appointed people in from around the area, and they had discussions, speech and discussions, and that was the way that they influenced those people. And so now we still do that. We have a speaker once a month, and we put on these sessions. So I'm proud to introduce the James A. McKee Association. I've been a member for 10 years or so, and I believe that we do a few good things, and we'll keep doing it. Okay. My name is Fred Bartenstein, and I'll be your moderator tonight. And here is the schedule of events. We have
one candidate for mayor, and she's going to speak for 5 minutes. And there is 30 minutes set aside for questions. We may or may not need all those 30 minutes. If we don't need them, I will take executive privilege and move us on into the council candidates. There are 7 council candidates, each of whom will speak for 5 minutes, and that will be followed by 35 minutes for questions and response. Here are the ground rules. Each candidate, and in some cases there might be a representative for the candidate, will present for up to 5 minutes. And the audience members, that's you, may submit questions on 3x5 cards. Who has got the cards? At the front door. So if you need a card, get it at the front door. Once you've written your question, wave it in the air and a volunteer will pick it up. And indicate on your card who you wish to respond to your question. Once we get to council, it's pretty obvious the mayor will respond to her questions. The McKee group and I may group similar questions, and I will present them to the candidate for a 1-minute response. It will be up to me to decide if clarification is needed and allow a brief further response. We're going to end on time, no later than 9. And based on what I hear about last night, I've been asked to add a 7th ground rule, which is to remind the audience to please refrain from applause and verbal response. And so that the Yellow Springs News article can say, Wednesday night was superbly polite. There you go. Amen. So with that, I will leave the ground rules up for you to study, and while we bring up Pam Kanine, candidate for mayor.
I want to welcome everyone to round 2 of Candidates Night. Last night was certainly informative, and I know we're all looking forward to hearing from the council members tonight. What an important job you all do. What an important job so many of you are stepping up to do this go-round, and it's wonderful. I'm so glad you threw your collective hats into the ring. And I also want to thank the James A. McKee Association for continuing to sponsor this event. Isn't it wonderful to be able to lay down our social media for an evening and actually listen to live people making responses in person and answering our questions? In fact, McKee Association, I appreciate you throughout the years, was mentioned for all the opportunities and conversations that you provide. You're doing extremely important work. I am Mayor Pam Kanine, better known as Mayor Pam. This is my 3rd time running for mayor, last time and this time running unopposed. The McKee Association gives all candidates, including those running unopposed, their 5 minutes at the mic, and give a politician a mic and you know what's going to happen. So they did send me 2 questions to address, and I will do that during my 5 minutes. But first, a few words on my approach to the office of mayor. I first ran on the platform of being a visible and active mayor. As was stated before I took the mic, the village charter directs the mayor to run the mayor's court and is the ceremonial head of government. In my first campaign, I added a 3rd leg to that stool, which I call my educational component. As a former social studies teacher, among other subjects, for 42 years, I know the importance of laying a solid foundation in civics in our public schools, and especially in our public schools, and especially at this time, our government demands it. On Monday, I went into Mills Lawn School, read to the kindergartners, spoke to various classes as requested by the teachers, tutored 4th and 6th grade classes, attended Mills Lawn School special evening programs, highlighting their student work. I also was guest speaker in classes at both the high school and McKinney Middle School. But then came COVID, and that put the kibosh on all that for now. I'll also add a few words about what I did during the deepest, darkest days of the COVID months, beginning March 13th, 2020. I will point out that was a Friday the 13th, following Governor DeWine's declaration of a state of emergency on March 9th. I laid aside all regular mayoral duties and joined the village leadership team, which included not only the village government staff under the superb leadership of Josue Salmaron, Johnny Burns, Police Chief Carlson, but Miami Township Fire Rescue Chief Altman, School Superintendent Dr. Holden, representatives from the Yellow Springs Community Foundation, and various other village stakeholders. For months, we had daily leadership Zoom meetings, soon adding 3 days a week town halls, broadcast on Zoom, Channel 5, social media streaming, shout out Philip. I'd love to talk more about the village COVID response, but suffice to say tonight it was phenomenal, but I want to get back on focus. My 2 questions from the McKee group were, number 1, in my opinion, what are the 2 most important issues the mayor needs to address? And number 2, what ideas do I have to address these issues? I'll answer those questions by highlighting what's already been done and what I plan to continue during my 3rd term. Number 1, the mayor is the ceremonial head of the village, and as such, I've written and delivered 77 mayoral proclamations. There you go, Roger. As of today, I've married 104 couples, have 2 weddings on the calendar for the next 2 Saturdays. Since elected, I've held office hours at the Bryan Center office Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1 to 5. I accept invitations to attend special occasions at which the mayor is requested, and I attend as many social activities, art, facility sort of things and so forth going on in the village as my calendar allows. 2, the second important responsibility of our mayor is to operate the mayor's court. I've held 68 mayor's court sessions in the last 4 years. At the recommendation of the Village Justice System Task Force Mayor's Group Subcommittee, which I listened to very carefully and participated in, our police force is now sending all cases that can be heard to the mayor's court. Local justice for local issues, we like to say. The court is used for many, we use as many restorative elements as we can during the court. Following a conversation I had with the Ohio ACLU, their representatives visited Yellow Springs and we had a sit down, which resulted in our court being cited as an alternative model for other mayor's courts in Ohio. I plan on continuing to maintain this overall approach to being your mayor. It's a position I enjoy and in which I am honored to serve. Thank you very much.
Stay up at the podium and I'll present some questions to you. Madam Mayor, please describe your detailed planned response to managing mask violators if they end up in mayor's court.
Oh, that's a good question, because so far we haven't had any. I would approach that the way I approach every other statutory infraction, take a look at it, read the ticket, listen to the evidence, and adjudicate accordingly. So to give a detailed plan would be requiring knowing the offense. So I would have to study the packets of ticket as it comes to me and then do my proper inquiries of the defendant and so forth.
This is the audience's last call for questions to the mayoral candidate. Everything that's been handed in is for council.
I'll be here afterwards if anyone has a more specific question. I have business cards in the back, and I'm always available Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 to 5, Bryan Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, would the council candidates please come up and all sit on the stage? I'm going to quietly adjust the schedule since we did gain considerable time there. More time for questions. Okay, first to address the group for 5 minutes is Carmen B. Brown.
Hello, everyone. My government name is Carmen Brown. My preferred name is Carmen Lee. If you have the occasion to address me by birth, my first and last name, call me Carmen Lee. My family has been in Yellow Springs for roughly 160 years and in Greene County since 1823. I've seen a lot of changes in recent years, but the thing that I've seen the most of is kind of moving away from civil discourse and being able to have conversations with our neighbors and other community members, including members of our village government, without it kind of deteriorating into something that is unmanageable. That's really primarily why I kind of decided to run. There are some other things that kind of prompted me to run too. If we are as progressive as we say we are as a community, and as other communities in the area perceive us to be, then we need to diversify council. There needs to be some representation on council for people who live at or below the federal poverty level. There needs to be some representation for people who may or may not have a disability. There needs to be some representation for people who may be single parents that don't have any additional support. And there needs to be some representation from people who have school-age children. Those things are critically important to me, but I'm gonna start where, I'm gonna finish where I started with the 5 minutes thing. It's, in order for us to build civility back in and kind of rejuvenate the spirit of civility in our discourse and our dialoguing with one another, the first thing that we have to do is suspend our judgment of the other, right? So we get into trouble when we're speaking to people, when we come with our presumptions about them or things that we've heard about them, from how we kind of sort out the world. It's kind of human nature. We're hardwired that way. But it's critically important for there to be an effective communication that we don't judge someone else's experiences before they open their mouth. If we can move from there, then we have a better chance of being able to talk without it, completely collapsing into something that is uncivilized, for lack of a better term. And that's all I got for that. Anybody have any questions?
We'll handle the questions late at the end. Thanks. Second speaker will be Lindsay Burke.
Good evening, everyone. I'd first like to thank the James McKee Group for hosting this. I came last night and I was really impressed. I had to leave early, but I was really impressed with how everything progressed last night. I want to thank all of you for coming and being civically engaged. I know it's not necessarily what you had planned for the evening. I'm Lindsay Burke, as I said before. I am the co-owner of Yellow Springs Inc. Arts Collective, which opened this year with Pierre Negri. I am a single parent in the village of a very gregarious Move Lawn student. I'm a longtime resident of Yellow Springs, only 12 years, so I know by local standards I'm still new. In my time in Yellow Springs, I've served on the HRC, the Human Relations Commission, the Feminist Health Fund, the Village Assistance Network, and most recently on the Downtown Business Association. I've served many of you meals, cleaned your homes, taught your children, maybe tattooed your loved ones at my new shop. Many of my connections in the village have been made through political and social justice organizing or community building efforts. But on a personal level, I've grown and developed in this community just from being part of an interconnected community. Yellow Springs is where I chose to make my home, raise my child, start my business, and put down roots. I'm running tonight to bring much needed and missing perspective to council. If I were elected today, I'd be the youngest member of council by 20 years. I'd be the only person on council with a child in Yellow Springs schools. I'd be the only local business owner, service worker, etc. We need balanced representation. We need young families. We need our creatives. We need our workers. We need our entrepreneurs. We need all of us. We have a lot of work to do to recover from the COVID crisis. We have to navigate critical coming changes, and we have to develop the incredible opportunities that our community has coming to grow and to thrive in our future. This will require a thoughtful approach that keeps pace with our resources and includes all villagers. Council needs to be cohesive. We set the tone for transparency, consistency, and considerate cooperation between residents, businesses, and our governing bodies. So what are my priorities? That was the question that was asked. My choices would all center, thank you. My choices would all center around affordability, sustainability, stewardship, and cultural diversity. I hope to get into more specifics of this in the Q&A section, but we'll just cover some highlights. We need affordable housing yesterday for working class, seniors, and young people to establish roots here. I want to acknowledge the valuable work of Homey. They've served a lot of people in our communities, but we have to understand that they are not designed or equipped to meet the entire need. We're going to have to go further than that. Many people that make up the fabric of our community have had to find housing elsewhere, myself included from time to time during my inclusion in the community. We need decent rental accommodations. I'm going to repeat that. We need decent rental accommodations. We need multifamily housing. We need to focus on infill development, and we need space for alternative housing models. Yellow Springs has a legacy of exceptional creativity, progressive action, diversity, and talent. If we value and honor that legacy, we have to preserve what has always made us great. It's not the buildings, it's the people. The buildings change. They need our help. But we have to invest in our human treasure. None of this belongs to us. We're stewarding it for the next generation. Our strength will be in coming together to overcome our challenges. We're interdependent and interconnected. Some of the challenges I see being important are our budget, our infrastructure, selection of a police chief, and making the village sustainable and accessible for businesses and families to start here and stay here. I've seen my 30 seconds, so we'll address more in the Q&A. Thank you very much for the time.
The next candidate will be Laura Carlos.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you to the James McKee Group. It is wonderful to see all of you in person. I'm so tired of Zoom meetings. But the one good thing about it is, in a way, it makes it very accessible to many more people. On the downside, I find that we have people who Zoom in that you don't necessarily know who they are or what their tie is to the village. So one thing on my list of issues of concern is governance. And I think that there has been a tendency in local government to be less open to diverse opinions. Collegiality means conformity. I think there's a certain authoritarian sensibility that if you go outside whatever the norm is, you will be punished. So I think this tendency is unfortunate and very unlike the Yellow Springs that I came to live in. I came here about the same time as Lindsay, about 12, so we're the newbies maybe. My son did go to school here in the school system. And my husband and I chose to come here, hopefully to retire here. I've worked in government for many, many years, including as the village administrator here. I've worked as a prosecutor, I've worked for a judge, and I've worked as an assistant to a mayor for about 8 years. So what that has made me in some ways is a little bit jaded about certain things that happen in government. I think my perspective is very different because when something happens or I see something going on, I know there's like 3 levels of things that happen for us to get there. And I'm asking questions about, well, how did that happen? Or when did that happen? Because I know there are things like sunshine law and there's certain things, compliance, things that have to happen. So I'm usually coming at things from a different perspective, I think, that a lot of people don't recognize. So on village issues, I looked at my platform from 2 years ago, and much of it is still the same. Now, 2 years ago, when we were sitting in this room, nobody knew there'd be a pandemic coming. As Mayor Pam gave you the timeline, pretty much in March, and suddenly the whole agenda changed. So I would say at this point, certainly the pandemic is very much in people's minds, but I hope that we've all relaxed a little bit and that we've all done what we can. Government continues to be vigilant, but we're in a very different place than we were 2 years ago. So I've moved to the top of my list, governance. I've put in second place continuance with justice system reforms. This government, this council's declared racism a public health emergency. I would also put right up there sexism. I think that there are a lot of reforms that we can do. Again, I have been in the system and worked, as I said, as a prosecutor, and I see things happening that make me very uncomfortable from a civil rights standpoint. Now, how do you change some of those things? It takes a lot of hard work. And I think one important change, if we can right-size it for this community, is what is often called citizen or civilian overview of law enforcement, a citizen review board. If you want to learn more about the work that not only I, but many, many citizens, some of whom are sitting in this audience tonight, have done, there's a green flyer behind my sign on that table. You can read more about it. I'd also put at the very top of my list, as it was 2 years ago, infrastructure, including green infrastructure. I think we have a lot to do with protecting the green infrastructure we have, as well as improving the, call it what you will, hardscape infrastructure like sewer, water, stormwater. So those are still at the top of my list. I think I might be the only candidate who has publicly declared, I want Mills Lawn green space permanently preserved, and I want to work with the next school board to do that. And however we do it, we need to do it. So other things, affordability, and in my mind, that includes all costs, utilities, taxes. The affordability issue is much more than housing, and we need many types of housing, including the missing middle. But I think that getting our arms wrapped around costs and not being afraid to talk about costs is very important. So I'll leave it at that. I thank you for your time. I thank you for being here. I thank you for watching out there in social media land. And please, my literature's back there. You feel free to call me anytime. I respond as quickly as I can to all citizen inquiries. Thank you very much.
Brian House, you're next.
See, Fred already knew that I was not going to use the podium. So first of all, good evening, and I want to thank JAMA, the James A. McKee Association, for hosting this. It's always a great event. I also want to highlight that I know a lot of you know me really well. I think you know the incumbents pretty well too. So I encourage folks to use this valuable time to learn more about our new candidates, because one of the things that Lindsay said that really resonated with me is the idea of diversity. It makes so much of a difference. So a brief introduction about me. I have a JD, and I used to practice environmental law. I also helped mentally ill folks get SSI benefits, which was a big challenge, but really rewarding. I have an MBA in entrepreneurship and finance. And one of the great things I was able to do during my MBA studies was help start a street market with residents of the housing projects in New Orleans. I came to Yellow Springs after owning a business in Thailand where we did communications consulting. And right when I got to the village, I started working with the Arts Council, then the Little Art Theater, and transitioned into my role as the Midwest policy guy for Rails to Trails Conservancy. Our office is right here in Yellow Springs, which is great, and I think it brings a lot of benefits to our community. It also informs a lot of how I think about walkability and bikeability in the village. And then I started the Yellow Springs Speech and Debate team 4 years ago. We work with 6th graders to 12th graders, and it is super great to work with our youth, very informative. I think a lot of you know that for 2 years, I was our village council vice president. And then for the last 5 years or 4 years, I have been our council president. And I want to note that when we came on, Mary Ann was part of that team. 2 things that we had to deal with right away. One was not a balanced budget. And secondly, was a lot of deferred maintenance with our infrastructure. And I'm very happy to say that we have been able to balance that budget, and we've also been able to, at the same time, invest in our infrastructure, and that is huge. And I'm glad that other candidates recognize how important that is to quality of life. Under my leadership, we were able to keep that budget balanced during the pandemic while still supporting our residents and our local businesses. And that is an activity that we need to continue because we are not out of the pandemic yet. We are in recovery mode, and I think that's a very important place for us to keep our focus, which means a couple different things. Number one, it means that we've got to continue to think about smart economic development. And I was working with Karen when we were able to secure Cresco, and that's a great example of bringing good jobs to the village and a company that is a good fit. Particularly serving people with serious illnesses with medical marijuana. Very important these days. And we heard last year that they're adding 85 jobs over the next year. The expansion continues, and we need to have more businesses like that that bring good jobs to Yellow Springs. The second thing that is important is that we continue to think about justice. And so I think about social, environmental, economic, and racial justice, and that relates to a couple different things. One of those being that we do need to continue to think about affordability. I agree that affordability is about housing. It's also about our utilities. It's also about things that we've done related to the source of income legislation that prevents that kind of discrimination. And there are a variety of other things that we continue to do that helps us get there. Now, admittedly, things are not affordable in Yellow Springs, but we can at least mitigate the crazy rise in cost of living by doing a variety of things. And that's work that I believe Village Council will continue. It's certainly important to me. When I think about racial justice, I think it's important to keep in mind that we need to continue things like building relationships between community members and officers. And I also want to talk about environmental justice. We need to have real action towards climate change. Last thing I want to say is I love Carmen highlighting civility. And I want to say that the first 6 years that I was on council, even with very serious differences amongst the members, we were collegial, and I believe that is a critical success factor. And so I'll end there, all right, before you put that up there, by saying I appreciate your vote. Thanks a lot.
home is next?
Awesome.
Osterholm. I'll never get that mistake.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? I'd like to thank the James A. McKee Association for hosting this. Very nice. Well, my name is Scott Osterholm. I moved to Yellow Springs in 1987 as a junior in high school from Bentonville, Arkansas. Yellow Springs woke me up. I was fortunate enough because I'm sure racism was there, but I came from an all-white county, so I never had to deal with it. I didn't really get to find out about racism as a reality to me until I moved up north. But it wasn't in Yellow Springs. It's when I went outside of Yellow Springs. Certain areas of Dayton, areas, Springfield, and but I was prepared for it before I ever left Yellow Springs. I made friends, many friends. Lifelong friends, for like 35 years, still my friends. Which helped me along as I traveled the country doing stained glass restoration. I did that for 25 years. I lived down in South Carolina I moved down there in 99, came down there, came back in 2014. When I got home, my son, he lives here, he's in his team, so I wanted to make sure his father was around, great. At that point. When I settled in Yellow Springs again, it was always been my mind. I was taken aback by the changes in community. Now, that saying is true. You can never go home again. That's just because you hold on that memory that you left with. It doesn't mean you can't make it your home again. And anyone knows what I'm talking about, there's a difference between what you call a house and what you call a home. I feel very strongly about this community. It's a very strong community. One thing I like about it is everyone has an opinion on something. Even when you agree with each other, they have an opinion, they'll argue with each other. Because it's not quite right. I love that about that. That's what my mom was so familiar with. But after being here about a year, 2015, I wanted to start getting more involved in the community. So I became an associate on the HRC. And I stayed down that committee for a couple of years. Then I wanted to do something else, so I moved on the search committee for the Bill Grant again, so I got on that committee after that. And then they asked me if, and now I know why they asked, is they had a shortage of people wanting to be on the board of zoning appeals. Now I know why. And they locked me into a 5-year term, believe it. And I have a lot of fun with that, because that makes differences in people's lives. You know, a little bit here, a little bit there. Either way, I'm helping make a difference. So for behind the scenes for the last 6 years, I've been making a difference a little bit. And right now, I'm on the citizens board that's looking for the new chief. And it's a very diverse group of people who are very opinionated. And I think we're going to get it right, because not everyone's locked into the same candidate. It's very meticulous, and we're taking our time at it, and that's going to be a process. Which leads me to that is one of the most important things that the council's looking at right now. It has. It's one of the best compliments I gave Chief Carlson when he left was that I haven't been hearing in the streets for the last couple of years what I used to hear. And that right there, that quietness, spoke volumes of how good the job Carlson did. And the whole force, so they all came together. The second one is affordable housing. And I personally got to live this story because I had a friend of mine, she had Section 8 housing, she had the whole kit and caboodle, and nobody would take it. So she had to leave. Fortunately, and I did not know this, but that better? Oh, sorry. Okay. Fortunately, she was on a list for the homing, and she was the first one into for the pocket neighborhood. And so she's back, she moved back. But I agree with Lindsay, that's not the only answer we got. And I believe Councilman Stokes wrote a letter to the editor, which I was very proud to see, the stigma of Section 8, we've got to get a conversation going in this community about, there's just something that's acceptable. It should be acceptable. There's no reason why we should not be taking that. And that's about all I got. I'm sure you're going to hit me some questions later, but you already gave me the 30 seconds on it, so I will turn this back over. Thank you.
Stokes. Well, thank you to the James A. McKee Association for hosting this once again. My name is Kevin D. Stokes. That's what G stands for later. I'm a resident, homeowner here in the village. I'm gonna read my statement, so I have a lot of words here, and if I don't read, I'll just stand up here pontificating for more than my 5 minutes. I'm a resident and homeowner in the village and work as the Senior Director of Facilities and Technology at Antioch College. I'm married to Karen Gardner, my lovely wife of over 15 years. Our blended family has brought together 5 children and 6 grandchildren. So Lindsay, I have grandchildren in the schools here. In addition to my role as a village council person, I'm a liaison to several boards and commissions, including either primary or alternate liaison to the Library Commission, the Human Relations Commission, the Housing Advisory Board, Residential Solar Task Force, and the Municipal Broadband Fiber Advisory Committee. I'm also a member of the Little Art Theater Board of Trustees, the Greene County Public Library Board of Trustees, Yellow Springs Development Corporation, the Yellow Springs 365 Project, and the Inclusive, Resilient, Livable, Equitable, Age-Friendly Coalition. So as you might imagine, I'm all in. I enjoy living, working, serving, and playing in Yellow Springs. 4 years ago, when I was initially elected to my first 4-year term, a couple of things that I focused on were economic development and affordability. Since then, I've been working on making recommendations and supporting legislation that helps foster a welcoming environment for business and engaging all housing initiatives to increase all types of housing stock. I also introduced initial discussions to curtail the expansive growth of transient guest lodging. I also, 4 years ago, focused on social justice and cultural competence. I spearheaded the initial set of implicit bias trainings, and I continue to support efforts to inform and educate village staffers in these types of initiatives. I also facilitated the village-wide Juneteenth, one of the village-wide Juneteenth celebrations, and hope that that can continue in the future. And another thing that I focused on when I was elected was the relationship between Antioch College and the village. My role in that regard is often more of a conduit and an information sharer, if you will, in my efforts to avoid conflicts of interest. Now, as a member of Village Council, I support all of the goals that we have developed for each of the 4 years that I've been a member of council. Moving forward, as we enter a new planning season for a new year, I've gravitated towards goals that align with my desires for the village, particularly providing an affordable community. And with that, we'll continue our work with utility roundup and other utility relief programs. And we will continue to support efforts to expand our tax base. Regarding supporting residential development, I'll continue to work to develop, along with my other council colleagues, to develop a partnership with YS Home Inc. and other housing developers that are willing to work within the expectations of village leadership. I also will continue to work to support rental housing and the rights of potential renters, as has been alluded to by other candidates. Thirdly, with respect to a goal that I am focusing on for this upcoming term, if I'm elected, would be repairing and maintaining infrastructure. And as, again, other candidates have alluded to, I'm referring to the hard infrastructure of our electric utilities, water utilities, sewer, and storm systems. Also, the digital infrastructure with regard to municipal broadband as a utility serving every household that wishes to participate. And also human infrastructure. You know, in the national discourse, there's debates about what is infrastructure. Well, we want to include the human infrastructure.
So we'll do things like working to remove barriers to having a vital existence here as a resident of the village. You can feel free to grab some of my materials in the back, and there's a tagline on my bifold or trifold, and it says, "I'm a leader with a heart for service." And that's not just a tagline, if you will, it's really who I am at my core. Long before I served on village council, my wife referred to me as Kevin for the community, because I always am about serving. I'm other-centered, not self-centered. It's my bent is who I am. And whether I will continue to serve as a member of village council, I will continue to serve in whatever capacity the village residents would have me. Thank you very much for your time.
Next candidate is Issa Walker.
Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is doing good out there on this wonderful evening. I'd like to thank the James A. McKee Association for giving us this platform. My name is Issa Walker. I'm a lifetime resident of Yellow Springs, and because of that, I care very deeply about the condition and direction our village is heading. For those who don't know, I'm a graduate of Yellow Springs High School. I went on to get my bachelor's degree in biology from Central State University and a master's degree in public health from Wright State University. Infrastructure issues like sewage and pandemic issues like COVID are under that public health umbrella of which I am certified. I've had many occupations, from internships in hospitals, working in the service industry here in town, and also working at the Wellness Center as a personal trainer. I am also a hip hop artist and have performed at many benefit shows, from Gym City Shine, a massive block party hosted by Dave Chappelle in benefit of the victims of the mass shooting in the Oregon district, to performing for the kids at the Yellow Springs High School and the Mills Lawn Elementary, which was in this very gym, letting them know that it is possible to pursue their dreams while also advancing their education. I've also performed in prisons with the World House Choir as a way to heal inmates. I attribute a lot of my success to opportunities and relationships this community has provided. I've also been involved in an organization called YPOC, Young People of Color, which focuses on diversity, inclusion, and representation for younger people of color. With that said, diversity, youth representation, and artistry have always been my primary focus. These very things make up the culture, which gives us a uniqueness from surrounding areas. So the primary issue I would like to address is cultural currency. This issue cannot be addressed without acknowledging the things that make up our very culture. Things like affordable housing. These things affect me personally because my family lives here. My father was a graduate of Antioch University and was the director of audiovisual at Wilberforce University and eventually Wright State University. He moved here well before I was born. He had a popular jazz show on WYSO and also coached Little League baseball and soccer here in the village. My mother received her master's degree from Antioch McGregor and worked there on the board of admissions. They came together here to start their family and were contributors to the culture. I want to make sure that Yellow Springs remains a place where families like mine can come together and establish roots in this community. We need better housing for younger families. We also need to improve the condition of housing that is already existing in the village. We need apartment complexes for lower income people as a better option than an older development, which will only further gentrify our community and outpace our community resources. We should also provide affordable housing for our seniors who most likely live on fixed income and may look to downsize. Also, another component of a welcoming culture is our policies on policing. I am completely for a citizens review board. I feel that it would only make our community safer and also establish a relationship with officers and the community. I feel it should be open to the community, granting the community decision-making power. I believe the new police chief should have some sort of local connection and an attitude of community service and be demilitarized. I'm also for the community broadband, which would provide us with a much-needed resource across the board while minimizing costs. This appears to be economically stable. This will provide people with better ways to work from home and encourage businesses to be here. We would also have more accurate data about the needs of our citizens and people who visit Yellow Springs. Economic sustainability is another. Economic sustainability is also another aspect of a thriving culture. And I hope that we can build a fund where people can donate and offset costs for people with lower income and fixed incomes. We should look into federal grants for rural economic development, and we need to create ways to increase tax base by exploring new business ventures, venues, and investments in our community. I also want to recognize Home Inc. for their work in the village. However, we need to provide more ways for young families to build equity. I'm also looking into expanding Section 8 availability in our village and creating avenues for alternative housing. I'm running on a platform of transparency and communication. And so if I'm not sure on an issue, I will seek out advice from an expert who knows. There's a reason why extraordinary people come to this place, and I hope to help preserve that culture and contribute to its future growth. Thank you very much.
So with your background in audio visual, would you make sure that microphone gets to the person that is being called on?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to start with the questions that are addressed to specific candidates. So Issa, if you give the mic to Laura Curlis, you have consistently voted down affordable housing projects. What would you do differently this time?
Yes, so I have not consistently voted down. I vote on the project. Just because X, Y, or Z, whether it's Ober or Home Inc. or whoever, brings a project to the village and asks for village money, which is taxpayer money, I'm going to look at that project. I think some projects are great. I think some projects shouldn't happen. So for example, I opposed affordable apartments on the bar property. Why? Because it's our best economic property in the downtown where the hotel now sits. So you can say I was right. We now have an economic engine on a great downtown property. So you have to look at each project on its merits, and that's what I intend to do. Thank you very much.
The next question is for Kevin. After last year's incident involving your and Mary Ann's letter to the Yellow Springs Black Lives Matter group, where you had to apologize to the group and the village of Yellow Springs, what did you learn? And can we trust you not to repeat this again?
Well, thanks for the question. I would moderate that a little bit and advise that Mary Ann and I chose to apologize. I don't know to what degree an apology was warranted or expected, but we chose to do that because we felt that was the right thing to do. And speaking for myself, and that's to some degree to Mary Ann as well. You use the word trust. Well, certainly you can trust me with whatever you empower me to do. The issue at hand was events that occurred at a private meeting, and I asked for a group of people to form a relationship with me. And things didn't go the way they could have gone. When those I was thinking. So would I put myself in a situation again where I expect a group that I'm working with to instead of just issuing demands and expecting me to comply, my point was not, let's just have that transactional relationship. Let's develop interpersonal relationships. Because these problems that we're trying to solve can't be solved overnight. So where I am perhaps being accused of going wrong was asking for personal relationship instead of transactional relationship. And if that is what I'm presented with again, I will expect the same thing from folks. Personal relationship, not just transactional relationship. But again, to focus on the word trust, you can trust me to represent and legislate as is needed. Thank you very much.
This is a question for the non-incumbents, and I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order. Issa, would you start? The question is, what administrative, governmental, or organizational skills would you bring to council?
Well, I've had a background in the YPOC, which is the Young People of Color. Sorry, I'm a little loud on the mic, I guess. In that organization, we were in charge of finding better ways that our youth will be treated by the police and developing relationships with the youth, particularly of color, and the police department here in town. So I guess my primary skills would be that I have a lot of diplomatic tendencies. I'm good at being able to be relate to one side and relate to the other side, and be able to find a peaceful middle ground and to develop that relationship. So, thank you.
Mr. Issa, if you take that down to Scott. Scott, I'll repeat the question. What administrative, governmental, or organizational skills would you bring to council?
Okay, I can make this kind of short and sweet. When I was in construction, I ran a road crew, so I had to do with the financing and the logistics and the ordering of materials. The company, so I do that administrative role with that with my company. I've also gone into trucking, and in trucking, what I've learned is having interpersonal skills with not only the forklift drivers, people that load these things, DOT, warehouses, just how to get around these places and how to work with these people so we get in and get out, get the job done easy, because a lot of times you run into a lot of stress when you're doing things. But the best one I got, that's how I know I can deal with council, is because I coach adults in the softball league here. And if I get them to play as a team, I'm pretty sure I get the people on council to play with me too. Thank you.
And Lindsay Burke, what administrative, governmental, or organizational skills would you bring to council?
Okay. Well, I've been a private contractor and managed complex schedules, needs, ability levels for nearly 20 years now, which hurts to say out loud. So I'm good at organization. I'm good at keeping people together. I'm good at connecting people. That's a skill that I have. Connecting abilities with needs. I'm good at making friends with people. I'm good at transparency and talking through issues. And I feel like my work in the village speaks for itself. Yeah.
And Carmen, you are next, and I'm going to append to this question a specific one for you. So what administrative, governmental, or organizational skills would you bring to council? And what village initiatives and groups are you involved in?
So I worked at the Community Children's Center off and on for 20 years. I served as the interim director of Yellow Springs Community Children's Center. I served on the board of Home Inc. for 3 years. I also, there's an organization in town that was founded here that has had many incarnations, but in its most recent incarnation, the organization is called Human. It stands for Help Us Make a Nation. The most recent incarnation was getting, well, the thing that I did most recently, I'm the COO, but was getting nonprofit, federal nonprofit 501c3 status for the organization. I applied for status in February of 2020, and we received status in April of 2020. So that's the most recent kind of organizational stuff I have. I was the director of Mills on After School Care Program for a year and a half, and that involved everything from scheduling to payroll to interacting with Ohio Department of Job and Family Services for on behalf of families, kind of being a liaison. Let's see, I've done a lot of organizational and like administrative stuff. And in the spring, if things go well, I'll be attending Wright State for industrial and organizational psychology. How people work together interests me terribly.
Pass that to Laura. Laura, news reports indicate that your relationship with other council members and village staff is quite negative. And what do you plan to do to turn this around?
Great question. So as usual, I question the premise. I am often working on things that the majority does not support. So let's just start with that. I've worked on the Citizen Review Board, on justice system reform. I'd love to, I campaigned on this 2 years ago. I still believe it. We need council committees that reflect the departments of government. So right now, we don't have council, like we don't have a streets committee or a sewer committee or a public safety committee. So council actually doesn't get to work with staff very closely, as happens in other local governments. So I actually want that, but I have not been successful in convincing my fellow council people. So I find usually, which is fine, I call it the broccoli theory of how you do government. Offer broccoli, they turn it down, you offer broccoli again, they're going to turn it down again. Maybe the 5th or 6th time, you might get a citizen review board. Thank you very much.
If you'll pass that down to, if you'll pass that down to Brian. Brian, this is I think a related question. How do you plan on working together with Laura after last week's spat?
All right, thank you. Actually, Laura and I had a great working relationship prior to her being on council with the Active Transportation Committee. And I've always valued her knowledge, her expertise, and the censure was a signal by all of council to say, let's move on, let's be respectful, let's not bully, let's not use disinformation, let's not mischaracterize, and let's not incite people. I believe that we can move forward, and Laura has a lot to add, but it is critical to be successful as an elected official to do your homework, not just ask the same questions that have been asked year after year, to collaborate with others, and thirdly, to listen to everyone, not just a few constituents, and then balance that to come to the best decision. So I think these are things that we can do. Judith Henfling and I initially had a challenging relationship, and we're able to work really well together and do a lot of great things around social justice. Thank you, Dave.
The next question is for Lindsay Burke. What ideas and policies do you have to help increase affordable housing units?
Well, let me take a moment with that. I think that would depend on the type of housing that we're talking about, because different populations will need different accommodations. Housing for seniors and housing for young families will look different. We will need to talk about infill development, which means using the land we already have That's provided for in our comprehensive land use plan. There are open spaces that we've been talking for years about developing to put housing on. I'm interested in looking into that and taking some action, creating an action plan for that. I think we need complexes. I know apartment complexes aren't always popular in certain neighborhoods, but we do need them. We're short on time, but it's something that's important to me, and I have a lot of ideas about it. I'd be really interested in talking more about it when we have more time.
You pass that to Kevin. Kevin, why didn't you complete the League of Women Voters 2021 Guide questionnaire for publication?
Expected that question. Someone asked the same question last night, and my answer is similar. I just missed it. It was a mistake. I was thinking about and looking forward to providing input to the League of Women Voters, but I did not find the email in the morass of emails that I got until late in the process. Around the time of the due date, thank you. Around the time of the due date, we experienced some medical complications. My wife had some medical complications, and that probably distracted me. But the short answer is, I just messed up. And human error. There's a song called and I'm going to sing it right now. There's a song by an artist, Rag and Bones Man, says, "I'm only human." And it was human error, plain and simple. Thank you for the question.
Carmen, why didn't you answer the League of Women Voters questionnaire?
Carmen has 4 jobs. Carmen has a 13-year-old boy. Cat, yeah, it's right there. And sometimes Carmen doesn't always check her email like she should, because she's running several people's lives, and I overlooked it. I completely overlooked it. And that was just a lack of oversight on my part.
Thank you. Those were all the individual questions I have at this point. From now on, it's going to be questions to all of you. And if you don't mind, I think we'll limit it to 3 responses. So if you can indicate that you want the mic next, we'll get to it. Trust me, a lot of these questions get repeated, so you'll get your chance in later. So this question is for 3 of you. If the budget is balanced, why is council passing emergency funding to supplement the budget? I think this would be for the 3 incumbents.
So emergency funding is kind of rare, but you have, in the village budget, you have reserves. And this is another point on which I differ with my fellow council people. Again, it's not good, bad, or indifferent. I have my reasons, they have theirs. I would prefer to have reserves of more like 6 months to a year, because if something happened, like let's say the citizens voted down a levy for funding the government, we would have another election cycle to try to convince you that we need the money, right? So we have reserves, and sometimes things come up you need to supplement. I'll give you a great example. Homemade needed $12,000 to match a grant that they were hoping to get for home repairs. And they ended up getting it of what? Does somebody know, about $200,000? So we leveraged $12,000 into $200,000 for home repairs. That was unexpected. It wasn't in the budget. So that's a good example of why that happened.
Yeah, and you'll probably get the same answer 3 different times. But as Laura alluded to, a budget is a guideline. You start off the year, and we're going through that process now. We are trying to do a much better job. One thing that we're doing this year that's a little different than what we've done in the past. Typically what's happened, based on the calendar, we would do a budget and think we got everything in the budget, then we would do our goals. And then we sometime later in the year, in an effort to accomplish that goal, we'll say, oops, wow, we didn't quite budget like we should. So I think the short answer is, and then Laura gave a great example, and I alluded to working on a partnership with Home Inc. a little while ago. And one of the things that we want to do with respect to that partnership is plan our events together a bit more so that when Home Inc. comes to us with funding requests, we're not caught flat-footed, but we have a greater expectation of it. So again, you start with a budget that's a template, it's a guide. Things happen, funds that are in one account sometimes need to be moved over because some event occurred. So again, thank you for the question.
So I'll just add, supplemental budgets are read as emergencies so that that money can be available right away. So like that opportunity to leverage the 12,000 for 243,000 for home repairs, great example. The second thing is a supplemental budget isn't associated with a balanced budget. When we make those decisions, we still have to think about, are we going to keep the budget balanced when we do that? But beyond these opportunities coming up, there are also things like the lodging tax, which automatically goes into the general fund. And we want to invest that lodging tax. The reason why we began that fund is because we understand that tourism has an impact on our community. And so we like to use that money to build sidewalks and develop parks and that sort of thing. But again, I would separate the two things. Under my watch, we're going to continue to have a balanced budget, but supplementals, again, are emergencies only because we want to take advantage of those opportunities when they come up. But we are going to plan better so that we can expect those things more next year.
The next two questions are related, and they are the questions about policing. So if three of you will respond to this, I'll read them both. Since over 98% of the violence is citizen versus citizen, are we spending 98% of our efforts reducing such criminal activity in contrast to focusing on the police? And the other question is, by far our biggest expenditures are for police. Would you be open to redirecting resources to other investments like affordable housing or social workers that can improve public safety and our overall quality of life? Carmen would like to speak about the police and crime. What, as the siren goes off.
What I want to say regarding the police and everyone's interactions with the police, just because you don't have a negative interaction with the police doesn't mean that your neighbor doesn't, right? If you think about these things. So of course, 98% of the crime is from citizen to citizen, but what if you're not committing a crime? What if you're beaten and you're retaliated against by the police because you are? And that's the situation we find ourselves in. There are entire groups of people that are being made the victims of crime simply for trying to be human, to gain human status. So real quick, in Minnesota, if you kill a dog that's a service animal, you get, what is it? I don't know, $10,000 fine, up to $10,000 fine, you go to jail for 60, 90 days for a service animal. That's for a dog. There are those of us who operate and move around in the world who are still not seen as fully human. If we were, then laws like that wouldn't be on the books, and if you put your knee on somebody's neck, you go to jail. So just because your experience with the police hasn't been negative, doesn't mean that there are those of us, around that haven't had negative experiences with the police. Only thing you need to keep in mind, not judging other people's experiences to your own, because they're apples and oranges most of the time. But, they're both fruits. that's what we have, that's what we have to think about, and that's what we have in common. And as far as the police budget's concerned, we do need to think about what it would look like to redirect some of that budget into more civilian stuff.
Issa?
I agree with what Carmen said. As a young Black male, I like to share a little anecdote, a little story. This may have been known years ago. This is prior to social media. Something that happened to me right here in this village. When I was in high school, I was at a team party. This party got, I guess you could say, I don't know if we call it raided, but interrupted by the police. It was just a regular high school team party. What ensued from that was an over-aggressive action from our own police officer here. I can't remember his name, he's been long gone. But I ended up being held at gunpoint by this officer here in Yellow Springs, Ohio. So, and my mom was so mad about it. She went down and told the people, and he eventually resigned. I don't think the story ever blew up because I think they wanted to keep it quiet at that time, but this is before social media, so. But I was innocent, of course. There was nothing being done. It was an overreaction by our own police officer here. And so I guess I want to say that just because these stats may show, say these numbers may show one thing, I would still want to prevent, even if it happened one time, like in my instance, prevent that from happening again. Because people like me are often targeted by police officers. That's just a fact. And as far as the budget is concerned, like Carmen said, I agree. I'd like to look into redistributing some of those funds as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Scott? I'll reread the questions if you like.
Please.
Okay, since over 98% of the violence is citizen versus citizen, are we spending 98% of our efforts reducing such criminal activity in contrast to focusing on the police, and by far our biggest expenditures are for police? Would you be open to redirecting resources to other investments like affordable housing or social workers that can improve public safety and our overall quality of life?
Okay, I believe we've already made the move with, we have a social worker on staff now. So we've already started that move. Yes, I'd like to see some budget pull into that effect. If we get to where it goes to affordable housing, that'd be great. I can also say, I can't say anything about it yet because I haven't seen the budget. So I don't want to speculate, oh yeah, we find money there. I don't know. I'll wait till I see it. I believe we've made great strides. We're not there yet, but I believe we're getting away from the police department that East just described. And I was younger. I know what it's like to look down a barrel of a gun from an officer. This happened down an article, so I can relate. It's a life-altering event. But I also like the idea that we're moving towards peace officers. That's what I want. I want peace officers. I don't want police officers. I also want, because a lot of people say, oh, we need to do this, we need to demilitarize. Yes, we need to demilitarize. I get that part. But there's one thing else that we need to be very aware of. It's where we live. We're the blue dot in the reddest county. And any of those nut jobs out there, I want our police department to be able to defend us if it had to. So I will not, everyone's like, oh, we need to take their automatic. No, I want them to have those, because as long as our country allows anyone to own whatever they want for a firearm, our police department needs to be able to do it. My brother reminded me of that story of the reason it got like that. A few years ago, those guys bought all that body armor in LA. And they walked down the streets just shooting everyone randomly after they did these robberies. And all the police could do was defend with pistols, and it was a slaughter to the police got into a gun store and were able to match firepower with them. I'm not saying I'm a gun advocate, but we need to look at the realization of where we are at. While we move to becoming police officers, we don't want to be a soft target. Thank you.
Okay, if you'll pass it to Brian. The next question is for the three incumbents. What do you wish you would have known when you started on the council?
Well, I will say, first of all, I was lucky because I had a particular mentor, John Eastman, who we were working on a project, and for 6 months, I rode to Dayton and back with him and learned a lot about our infrastructure. And that is very important to understand the nuts and bolts. One thing maybe I would have liked to have known is that it's a heck of a lot of work if you want to be really prepared and you want to get things done. But I like work, so that wasn't a big deal. And I guess the other thing, and maybe I'm just speaking more broadly about good things for people to know, is that it is really great to have interactions with people from diverse backgrounds and a lot of different experiences. I guess the last thing I'll say is I wish that I knew a little bit more about some of the challenges related to human resources. And we've spent a lot of time building a great team, which I don't want to lose. And we've been really good at retention. And so that was rough at the beginning, but I've learned a lot about that.
Well, this might seem strange, but I wish I'd known how much fun it could be. Now that's, again, it does sound a little sideways, but as I was running the first time, I mean, I heard things like, man, it'll suck the life out of you. You know, you won't be able to go sit down in a restaurant and enjoy your meal. Folks will interrupt you all the time. And I thought I had a plan for that. I thought I was gonna say to people, hey, I'm sitting here enjoying a meal with my family. Can we talk later? Well, the fact of the matter is, those interruptions don't happen that often, and I enjoy them. It can be a lot of work. You do have to prepare. I chuckled just now because this week's packet, the previous packet was like 69 pages. Woohoo! You know, compared to 400 some odd recent, or even 200, maybe I've exaggerated 400. But a lot of work goes into it, but it can be a lot of fun. As I alluded to earlier in my opening remarks, you know, I'm a servant, and this gives me a platform to serve, and that's where I say it's fun. But you do have to prepare because it does require a lot of work. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question, please?
What do you wish you had known when you started on the council?
That collegiality is harder to come by than I would have hoped. I view, when you vote somebody on council, I assume they come with a certain constituency that wants to see certain things. And if Lisa has a thing she wants to work on, go work on it and bring it to council. Now, it doesn't mean we're necessarily going to get 3 votes or 5 votes, but at least she has a right to work on it. And she has a right to have staff help her work on it to develop a proposal that is worth your consideration. I think the other thing is, some of my questions, you need to realize I'm thinking about you. So if I ask a question, what is an ESID? It's not because I didn't do my homework. It's because you might not know what that is. So I'm aware that you're listening and that you need to understand what it is we're doing on council. And sometimes some of these things are not so obvious. The other thing, I agree with Kevin, 442 pages to read over a weekend, it's a lot of work. So that's kind of surprising too. Thank you.
Let's see who wants to take this on. There are 2 questions that relate to the schools. What entity should operate the Mills Lawn Green? And how will you vote on the school levy? Yes or no?
Well, I'm going to take that. So the first one for me is easy. I think it should be a public park. I think the long history of it, the intention, William Mills' intention, how it's been used historically, It's a cultural resource. It's an open space resource. Read all about it on millslawnGreenspace.org. If you're not into it, you need to get into the history a little bit. So I think, which entity should run a public park? Well, I think it's most obvious it should be the village. As for the levy, I'm a highly educated person. I've paid my way through my college degrees and my postgraduate degrees. I believe in education. I honestly do not know what the answer is on that issue. I'll tell you that. I feel like I can't tell people how to vote on it because there are good arguments on both sides. Thank you very much.
All right, Carmen will be next, and then Lindsay, and those will be our three on this topic.
So really quickly, I did get into a little bit how long, my family's kind of been here. So I guess the intention was for Mills Lawn to kind of remain a public and community space in perpetuity. That was from President McGregor from Antioch when Antioch gifted the Mills Lawn green space to the school board. So everyone has signs in their yards that say Black Lives Matter, right? Everyone's got those signs. I'm going to relate it. We are surrounded, we are the blue dot in a sea of red, as Scott pointed out earlier. In the 30s and 40s, 20s, 30s, 40s, up to the 50s, when people started, passing away, my great grandmother and her friend, Mary Morgan, used to bring their children to Mills Lawn to play in the daytime. A white woman, a Black woman, and their Black and white children together in the daytime in a village surrounded by essentially sundown towns. So if Black Lives Matter, then historically integrated spaces matter. Historically, publicly integrated spaces matter. So those signs in everybody's yards, think about that when you think about what's going to happen with Mills Lawn. And the second part really quickly is, I have a friend who is, this is neither here nor there. Oakwood High School is over 100 years old. You think it's not ADA compliant? It is. The buildings at Harvard are over 100, 150 years old. You think they're not ADA compliant? It is. And the other part of that is the people who have purchased their houses here that have tripled and doubled in value and have endured the rising cost of living in this village deserve to stay here, deserve to age in place. And the burden and the responsibility of whatever happens with this levy should not fall on the people who have been here, who are trying to live out the rest of their lives in their homes. I've heard people say, well, if you don't like it, you can just sell your house. It's not an option. And we should not ask the most vulnerable of this village's population to make those kinds of sacrifices. And that, that's all I have to say. And it disproportionately affects, the elderly of color in this village, just like it always has. So we need to keep those in mind. Black Lives Matter, okay, we can all agree. Does the 86-year-old man who could lose his home over this levy, who happens to be Black, does his life matter? We need to think about those things if we are as progressive as we say we are.
Carmen, would you carry that down to Lindsay? And Lindsay, the question again is, what entity should operate the Mills Lawn Green, and how will you vote on the school levy?
Okay, as a lower income single mom who lives here, who will be stretched by the levy, I still plan to vote for it, and here's why. I moved here to put my son in an exceptional school, and I want that to be the reason that I continue to stay here. I believe we can feel two ways about a thing. I understand that it's a big burden. I think we can make up that cost. I think that we can work together with the council to make that burden less on the people who are most at risk, like myself, and like people on fixed incomes. I think you can feel two ways about a thing. I still want quality schools for our kids, and I think it's time. So I'll be voting yes on the levy, and I will be working to alleviate that burden on our lower income and vulnerable citizens. Who should operate Mills Lawn, the green space? I don't think there's any political will or desire from anyone in the public to develop this or to take away that green space from us. I think we can come together and make middle ground between people who want to preserve and people who would like a school. There's commonality between us, and I think we should really work on what makes us common or what furthers our common goals. That's not going to be up to council. That's going to be a very large community discussion. That's going to be up to the YSDC. And I'm very interested in learning more about their plans for the space and how they plan to manage that. But we'll be learning that at the same time. So let's have community discussion about it.
The next question is, how would you advocate for senior housing in the village? And how high does it rank in your priorities? Who would like to take that?
I don't know.
All right, let me see. Laura and Carmen and Lindsay both raised their hands, and you were the three that spoke before. Scott also wants to do it. All right, we'll hear from 4 on this. Scott, Lindsay, Laura, and Carmen.
Okay, I'll just start. I think we need senior housing. That's going to be a different kind of development than has to do with the Mills Lawn space. Can you repeat the entirety of the question?
How would you advocate for senior housing in the village, and how high does it rank in your priority?
Oh, senior housing, especially for seniors that are on a fixed income, is an integral part of an affordable housing plan. Some seniors, I know we have Friends Care and they've done that whole development. I think we need to expand on that. I think we need to have a space where a person on a fixed income knows that they're not going to be forced out of their house. And we'll have lots more discussions about that.
Affordable housing for our seniors is to me, it's also in my affordable housing idea too. So if I wasn't clear about that, I apologize. I really like what Homey did with their pocket neighborhood, Lynn Cottages. I mean, not only do we got lower income people in there, but they also got some seniors. Good setup for seniors to live in. I would, any kind of development project we have over, hopefully we're gonna get some more senior housing in there. Like I said, with Homey, I like the idea of maybe a couple more pocket neighborhoods if we have it. And that goes as far as new development. And hopefully if we have some existing, we can figure out a way to, hopefully the ones that the families that keep, hopefully we can figure out a way to keep their homes. That is important because I remember when I first moved to Yellow Springs, and excuse me, I'm just a simple person at times when I say something. You couldn't sling a cat in this town and not hit a Hamilton, a Harding, or a Bennington. I mean, and they're all gone. There's so few of them left that actually live here now. And these are the people I grew up with. Thank you.
Scott, would you run that to Laura?
Some of you might have remembered Betty Ford. She lived right, she was one of my neighbors, lived in a single, raised her family in the house and lived there. Now, when she had to move, I want to be her when I grow up, by the way, but anyway. When she moved, she wanted to move into an affordable apartment. And where did she have to go? She had to go to Fairborn. You know, so let's start with that income group. So there's a whole contingent of people who have raised their families. I'm going to be one of them. They're aging in their wonderful house, but you know, they recognize that now maybe this house is too big and it's too much and I got to mow and all that stuff, right? So why is Park Meadows popular? Because it's senior condos essentially. So I think there's a huge market for that. So that will also help get seniors into that kind of housing so that families can have some of these bigger houses. And I think there's a lot of seniors here who want that. Then we do need like senior duplexes in the 150 to 175 range. I know that's dreaming, right, Sheila? I know, but we need that. So I hope we can get that working with nonprofits then.
Betty Ford is my grandmother's first cousin. Yeah, me too. So it's critically important. It's paramount that people who worked at YSI or who worked at Antioch Publishing or who worked at Bernay Labs and saved their money and had a retirement, but didn't expect to purchase a house for $30,000 that's now worth 3 or 4 times that, right? So we have the increase in the cost of living, increase in tax rates, increase in prescription costs, upkeep in housing, food, utilities, all the things that go with that. And, you know, people saved as much as they saved and didn't anticipate, it didn't anticipate maybe living as long as they have, or didn't anticipate the expense that would pile up, that kind of came along with living in Yellow Springs. So there's that. The other thing that's important really quickly is that, we're talking about a population that can't go get side gigs to make up the extra couple $100 a month that might be tacked on to already. There is no extra. And that's critically important for this community to realize. I grew up in a community that realized that there was no extra. And, we treated each other kind of accordingly. For some of us, there were people who did not have any extra. And asking for people who are of a certain age to bear the brunt of an increase, it just doesn't seem fair to me.
The next question is, what do you consider the 4 most important tasks for village council? Start with Kevin.
Well, there's probably more than I can come up with than just 4, but certainly managing your money. The funds that we're given to work with, we talked about budget a lot tonight. So being responsible and responsive regarding your hard-earned tax dollars. Representation is something that we've alluded to. I think Laura was giving some examples, perhaps about when we come to office, we come in with certain constituencies. Each of us serves at large. In other words, every single resident of the village is my constituency. Legislation. So that's something that we're required to do is legislate. Pass laws, we pass ordinances, we make changes to the way things work to make this a better place to live. And I think, again, bouncing off something that Laura alluded to, we inform. And we can be a great source of information, and I certainly appreciate, again, Laura's point, when you ask a question, and it's a style of teaching. You ask a question so that others can hear the answer to that question. So I think those are 4 things that I could offer, and I will hand the mic to whoever else.
Anybody else got 4?
While you're deciding who else can come up, on the senior housing, Homie had a proposal with the 3.5-story effort. They still are planning to do senior housing. So the short answer to that question is support that effort that wants to provide senior housing here in the village. And I didn't see who asked for the mic. Sorry.
So the first thing that's important is that we kind of rebuild and rejuvenate civility. That's number 1. Because if we can't effectively communicate with one another and exchange ideas, then we're stagnant, and that's not good. And part of that is the idea of moving forward, right? So things happen, and then according to what happens, we move in hopefully a forward direction. That's the second thing is representation. There are droves of people who come to this town every weekend. And me and my friends have to take care of these droves of people that come to this town. The people that drive this economy in this town are people who are working clopens from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m., 4 and 5 and 6 days a week. people who are working in our retail businesses, people who are our shop owners who are getting kind of inundated with all these people all the time. And the people who make this thing go, you know, this tourist part of the town go, are the people that are working. So that's two, but I got the card.
You got the card. You got a top four?
Yes.
All right.
I'll just quickly echo what Kevin said. So I like to say, I used to give the third grade tours of the government building. So legislation, we do legislation, we watch your money, your pocketbook, and to some extent policy. We set policy to the government along with the staff. Here in Yellow Springs, I'd add one more that I feel a special responsibility to help protect the culture, which is a culture of freedom, tolerance, creativity, hopefully diversity. I feel like government has to really treat that in a very special way. And that includes protecting your right to free speech, for example, your right to demonstrate, your right to go out and create the way you want to. So these are things that I think we have done historically very well, and I'd like to see continue. Thank you.
Anybody else want to do a top four priorities? Brian?
Yes, so again, I don't want to dominate the mic too much because I want the new candidates to speak, but we have to spend your taxpayer dollars correctly. We need to collaborate with citizens, with our village team, and with the various groups that are working hard in this village. We need to keep the lights on, and that's also why we need to work closely and support and not stress out our amazing village team. And fourthly, we need to make sure that we are involved and engaged in the community and that we're actually listening to everyone. And I do want to emphasize what Kevin said. Our positions are at large. We need to listen to everyone. We're not going to make decisions that make everybody happy, but ultimately we got to go through a fair process and try to balance those interests as much as possible. Thanks.
That was three responses. So, but I'll give you the first shot at the next question if you want it.
That's Eric first.
What do you think are the two biggest opportunities and the two biggest challenges for the village over the next 10 years? What are the two biggest challenges and the two biggest opportunities looking out 10 years?
Well, first and foremost is coming out of this pandemic smart and wise. I know it's been scary for some. But for me, you know, I'm kind of an outgoing person. Being stuck at home by myself is like trapped in my own mind. No, that's no place to be. So getting through this pandemic is one thing. Another challenge is getting smart growth in here, not only with the housing, but with businesses. We're talking about good jobs. And I'll just leave it at that since you just gave it a 30 seconds on. What was the second part of that?
Opportunities and challenges over the next 10 years.
That's kind of one of each. Another challenge is making sure, and everyone talks about the broadband, and I'm for the broadband, but I would really like to look at our infrastructure as far on the electrical grid, because it seems like sometimes we have a storm and everyone knows there's always a part of town that loses power. So if we're gonna have a broadband, we need to make sure we keep the power going. Unfortunately, staff does something on that. And another challenge, and Laura brought that up, and I've got to totally agree with that, is we've got to keep our traditions, because the common know what I'm talking about so easily. We got to keep that vibe we had going back here. Remember that vibe Yellow Springs had? And I don't mind people moving here, but it seems like some people get it when they move here and they just fit in. And then there's some that don't. And I guess part of the reason I'm like, if you're not gonna fit in, don't try to change us into what we ain't. Because we ain't We're gonna go screaming in that night. All right, thank you.
Kevin, and then Laura.
I'm gonna cheat. Question was about two opportunities and two challenges. Well, I'll mention a couple of things that are both opportunities and challenges. I think housing. So let's go back. Oh, I wasn't here 30 years ago. I've only been here since 2014. Yeah. So there were opportunities a few decades ago to accept industry that ended up going to Fairborn and Xenia and other places. So now that we have opportunities, we have CBE, we have opportunities, and some businesses are starting to come in and crop up. You know, so that's an opportunity, but it's a challenge to get it right. We alluded to our culture. So we want to accept and establish businesses that fit that culture so we can maintain who we are. We cannot control all of it, but we have to make the effort. So again, those two things are both opportunities and challenges: housing and getting more business in. We didn't want more housing years ago. So that is what has created the challenge of now we need them and we're a little bit behind the curve. So housing and business, both challenges and opportunities, we need to take advantage of.
I would frame it a little differently. I think the biggest challenge is going to be infill and repurposing. So infill, think about all the land. You know, we want housing, we want more business, we want room for this or that. But redeveloping and infill is a challenge. And that couples with, we're all concerned about Antioch, right? Because they have a lot of the land that could be infill, right? I feel truly, I'd like to know how we can help, but I feel powerless a lot of days as a council person. I'm a cheerleader from the sideline, like go Antioch, go. And so I hope we have higher ed here for a long, long time. If we don't, that's a lot of infill. The same issue is kind of like with this land. If the levy passes, what do we do with this building or this end of the property and the green space? So I think these infill things are a big challenge and opportunity. And then the other thing related to broadband is a challenge. Hopefully it'll be accepted and it's an opportunity. But another challenge people haven't talked about, think about how expensive housing is now and how expensive it'll be if you have fast, high-speed internet, people can work from their homes more. So that's a challenge and an opportunity.
What is your personal commitment to supporting the LGBT community, and how would you do it as a council member?
I don't want to hog it, but I support.
Well, okay, we'll go to you next. Carmen.
Well, here I am. So it's critically important that we hear from everybody in our community from a marginalized group. It's, all the time, but especially now. Supporting anybody goes all the way back all the time to like your right of freedom of expression. And everybody should get to say everyone has the right to say what they want to say, when they want to say it, to whom they want to say it to. Whether or not they have consequences is another matter. So it's really, really important as for me, if I were to become a council member, to make sure that I was very conscientious about how I carried myself. I'm not interested in shutting anybody down at any time. Everybody can say what they want to say. And this was related to LGBTQAI, I don't think, but
personal commitment to supporting LGBT community, and how would you do it as a council member? But you've got the card, it looks like. So, Laura, did you want to say something? Others? Anybody else want to take this one on? Lindsay.
Thank you. I am a queer woman, which I don't talk about often, but here we are, and we're having a conversation. I support LGBT rights and representation. I think anybody should be able to be who they are and not be judged for that. I think we need to support our youth, particularly, especially the ones who are working those identity issues out. I think we need to support our members of our community who are identified in ways that are often targeted. And yeah, I think we need representation. I'm here to represent them.
Okay, what are your thoughts about increasing the presence and empowerment of African Americans in Yellow Springs? Increasing the presence and empowerment of African American members.
From what I understand, Yellow Springs has always been, far as to my knowledge, a place where they were for the inclusion of the rights of African Americans and diversity here. And so me as an African American being from here, I can't help but to see the dwindling numbers of us here, especially young ones like me. And that's one of my main goals as a candidate, is to really try to find ways to further diversify our community and to increase the numbers. I feel like when I was in high school, I think 30% of the village was of color. And now, I don't know what the numbers are now, but I can, by eyeball test, I can tell it's definitely dropped. So I would like to see a decrease in the gentrification and an increase of African Americans and our representation here in this village, in the culture. And I feel like that's what makes us who we are. And without that, without us here, I feel like I wouldn't recognize this place.
So I am here. I am a person of color. And I'm performing a role that I've been empowered to play. So part of the work of one of the groups with which I'm affiliated, the Inclusive, Resilient, Livable, Ethically, Age-Friendly Community Coalition, is to look across the community, looking at some of these boards that several of us serve on, looking at village council, other branches of power, if you will, throughout the village. And I think it's important, even to echo Lindsay's point, I think it's important to have broad representation, in all of those power stations, if you will, where there's an opportunity to make a difference. It doesn't have to be the boardroom, it can be grassroots, but we need to make opportunities and advocate for people of color, different broad diversity across the board, to be in these positions of power. I mean, this is a big deal. There were several reasons why I decided to run for council 4 years ago. One of them was that the sole person of color was stepping down from council. And we talk about diversity so much that I just didn't think that an all-white village council was a good picture in a community that focused on diversity. So I could go on, got the card, but make opportunities, nurture people, mentor people, make opportunities, open doors, let different folks come in and do some of the work that we're talking about that needs to be done.
Okay, Carmen is our third and final speaker on this topic. Increasing the presence and empowerment of African Americans in Yellow Springs.
So what we can do is when young women of color speak out and speak their mind, we can work not to shut them down. That's what we can do. When people of color feel comfortable enough to move around in the space in their home, they need to feel safe enough to know that when they say things, when they speak their mind, they're not reprimanded for it. That is critically important. It's important for everyone. It's important for every single one of us. But in these times, we need to exercise the right for people to say what they want to say. If we agree or don't, it doesn't matter. We need to protect that and defend that. That's supportive. That's creating a safe space. If you live in a community where you can't say what you want and say how you're feeling, then that's not a progressive community. Without fear of being reprimanded, that's not a progressive community. And you know, that is critically important for everybody. But especially for, you know, women of color in no position of power, no real power. Sometimes the only thing we have is our voice. And we need to start there. That's the baseline.
Okay, obviously we have not gotten to all the questions. The ones that I did not ask, I will put back at the table. And if anybody wants to look at what they were, they'll be there. But this is the last question of the night, and we'll take up to 3 responses to how will you increase citizen engagement in village initiatives? Scott, pass it all the way down to Scott or carry it to him.
Before I got here to this spot, in this moment, I got involved in committees. I really think a lot of people, especially the younger generation coming up, should start getting involved in these committees. You find your voice. You get to talk to your council members. You get to do work. We need to get people more involved in these committees. It should be the same old people sitting on these committees forever. And when my 5 years done, the BZA, I'm not doing another committee. Because that would be, no, it's not because I don't like it. I actually enjoy it. But that would be 10 years I've given to the village out of my own personal time. And, you know, you don't have to do 10 years. But I did it on multiple committees. I just think that's one way to get people involved is get on these committees. You know, if you're into art, get on the art council. If you want to help with people's lives, I would totally recommend get on human relations. And you'll find satisfaction. That's all I can say.
Lindsay.
Thank you. So one important way to get people engaged is to show them that their voice matters and to show them that they can be represented and that when they say something, that they'll be listened to. I think what people in my age group and younger need is to know that we have a place in village government. I think that one thing that marginalized groups need to know is that they're going to be listened to and represented. And I think we all as citizens need to know that when we voice our opinion and we show up to meetings and we participate in town halls, that we're going to be listened to, that our representatives are going to take what we say seriously and that they're going to do what we ask them to do. So first thing is representation. We need to see the kinds of people that we want to engage in our representation in our government. That's why I'm here, and that's why several of us are here. And then just creating those conversations and listening to them.
I just wanted to say very quickly, I agree with Lindsay and Scott. Representation is key. Growing up, here, I feel like I was completely disconnected from the village council and things of that nature. Even though I'm from here, and I think part of that reason is because I don't think I've truly looked up to the people who were in the village council for a long time, growing up. Like I didn't look at that person and say, man, he's just like me. Like I would love to, I can relate to that person. There's something about that person I want to be like. So I can say that representation is key, and younger people, because the future of this community will be in the hands of the people who are young now. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I'd like to commend all the participants, the McKee Society for organizing this and for the most civil and participatory audience that I've seen in a while. Thank you all for coming, and let's acknowledge everyone.